London, 1816. Miss Amelia Grantham had perfected the art of refusal. With a gentle incline of her head, a practiced smile that never reached her eyes, and a firm, "I thank you, no," she had declined every dance request for 5 London seasons. Not a waltz, not a quadrille, not even a country dance had tempted her to abandon her comfortable seat along the ballroom wall, where she sat with remarkable poise, observing the whirl of society with detached amusement. "Another one bites the dust," whispered her younger sister, Beatrice, as a crestfallen young gentleman retreated from Amelia's latest refusal. "That makes 3 this evening alone. You must hold some sort of record." "I have no interest in records," Amelia replied, adjusting her gloves with practiced indifference. "Only in peace." At 26, Amelia had long since abandoned the notion that marriage was a necessity. Her parents, having successfully matched Beatrice to a viscount the previous season, had thankfully ceased their most fervent efforts to parade her before eligible bachelors. She had become something of a fixture at society events, the handsome, intelligent spinster who somehow managed to attend every ball yet dance at none. What the gossips of the ton could never understand was that Amelia's refusals stemmed not from pride, but from clarity. Marriage, as she had observed countless times, was merely a business arrangement dressed in lace and sealed with vows that meant precious little once the settlements were signed. Her own parents' cold alliance had taught her that lesson early. Her father had gained her mother's dowry, her mother had gained a title. Neither had gained happiness. "You cannot refuse every dance until you're grey," her mother, Lady Grantham, had once declared in exasperation. "Watch me," Amelia had replied, with the quiet determination that characterized her approach to life. She had a comfortable inheritance from her grandmother, enough to maintain her independence without requiring a husband's resources. Freedom, she had decided, was worth far more than the temporary adoration of a husband who would eventually reveal his true nature once the marriage contract was sealed. Tonight's ball at Wentworth House was like dozens before it. Glittering chandeliers, the same circling vultures disguised as eligible gentlemen, the same matchmaking mamas eyeing potential prey. Amelia had positioned herself beside a large potted palm where she could observe without drawing undue attention. "Miss Grantham," a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts as Lady Jersey approached. "You look positively bloom-like this evening, though I dare say the flower refuses to be plucked from its comfortable pot." Amelia smiled. Unlike most of society's matrons, Lady Jersey never pressed her to dance or marry. Instead, she seemed to find Amelia's resistance to convention rather amusing. "Some flowers are better admired from a distance, my lady." "Indeed, though I wonder if the right gardener might not tempt you to transplant." Lady Jersey's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Have you heard the whispers? The Duke of Pembrooke has returned to London." Amelia maintained her composure, though the name sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Everyone knew of the notorious Duke of Pembroke. Percy Yardley had inherited the dukedom 7 years ago after his elder brother's unexpected death, transforming from a carefree second son into one of England's most powerful peers. His reputation was fearsome, a man of few words but decisive action, who had doubled the family fortune through shrewd investments while simultaneously terrifying the ton with his icy demeanor and uncompromising business practices. "I cannot imagine why that would interest me," Amelia replied, though she found herself scanning the room involuntarily. Lady Jersey laughed. "My dear, it interests everyone. The man attends perhaps 3 social events annually, and he has chosen this one. The matchmaking mamas are practically salivating." Before Amelia could respond, a hush fell over the nearest portion of the ballroom. Like a wave, the silence spread until even the orchestra seemed to falter. Through the parting crowd walked a tall figure in immaculate evening attire, his broad shoulders and commanding presence causing people to step aside instinctively. The Duke of Pembroke had arrived. Amelia observed him with academic interest. His features were striking rather than classically handsome. A strong jaw, penetrating eyes beneath dark brows, and a mouth that appeared unaccustomed to smiling. He moved with the confidence of a man who never questioned his place in the world. "Well," breathed Lady Jersey, "this promises to be an interesting evening after all." Within moments, the Duke was surrounded by eager introductions and simpers from the season's debutantes. He acknowledged them with cool politeness that bordered on indifference. Amelia felt a surprising kinship with him. Here was another soul who seemed to view the marriage market with appropriate disdain. The dancing resumed, and Amelia settled back into her comfortable observation post, only to notice with alarm that Lady Jersey was beckoning the Duke in their direction. "Your Grace," Lady Jersey purred, "may I present Miss Amelia Grantham?" The Duke's piercing gaze settled on Amelia, assessing her with unsettling thoroughness. She returned his look steadily, refusing to display the customary feminine fluster that seemed expected when faced with a powerful man. "Miss Grantham," his voice was deep and unexpectedly melodic, "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in Sir Thomas Hartley." Amelia raised an eyebrow in genuine surprise. Sir Thomas was her late grandmother's solicitor and the man who managed her modest inheritance. "Indeed, Your Grace, Sir Thomas has managed my affairs for many years." "He speaks highly of your financial acumen," the Duke continued, causing Lady Jersey's eyebrows to rise at this most unconventional topic of ballroom conversation. "It is rare to find a young lady who understands the difference between canal shares and railway investments." Amelia's curiosity was piqued despite herself. "The distinction is rather crucial if one wishes to maintain one's capital, Your Grace." The faintest suggestion of a smile touched the Duke's lips. "Precisely." He glanced toward the dance floor where a set was forming. "Miss Grantham, would you do me the honor of this dance?" The question was so unexpected that Amelia momentarily lost her practiced composure. Lady Jersey's eyes widened with delighted scandal, and Amelia became aware that several nearby conversations had hushed as people strained to hear her response. 5 seasons of automatic refusals should have made her answer simple. Yet something in the Duke's direct gaze, a challenge perhaps or a recognition, made the familiar words stick in her throat. Before she could properly consider the consequences, Amelia heard herself say, "Yes, Your Grace. I would be pleased to." A collective gasp rippled through the nearby observers. Lady Jersey looked as though Christmas had arrived early. The Duke, however, merely offered his arm with a nod that suggested he had never doubted her acceptance. As he led her toward the dance floor, Amelia felt dozens of shocked gazes following them. The notorious wallflower and the forbidding Duke, it was fodder for weeks of gossip. "You seem to have caused quite a stir, Miss Grantham," the Duke observed as they took their places in the set. "I believe the stir is mutual, Your Grace," she replied, surprised at her own boldness. "Though I wonder why you would single out a confirmed spinster for such attention. Perhaps because you're the only woman in the room who wasn't scheming for it." The music began, and Amelia found herself swept into the patterns of a quadrille. Despite her years of refusing to dance, her body remembered the steps her governess had drilled into her since childhood. The Duke moved with surprising grace for such a formidable man. "I must warn you," Amelia said, during a momentary pause in the figure, "that you've just made me the central character in tomorrow's On Dit. An improvement on yesterday's gossip, I should think, when I was supposedly negotiating to purchase half of Cornwall." A surprised laugh escaped her. "Were you not?" "Only a third." His expression remained serious, but a glint in his eye suggested humor. As the dance continued, Amelia became uncomfortably aware of her racing pulse, a reaction she attributed to the unaccustomed exercise rather than her partner's penetrating gaze. When the music ended, the Duke returned her to Lady Jersey with impeccable courtesy. "Miss Grantham," he said with a formal bow, "I thank you for a most refreshing dance." With that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Amelia to face Lady Jersey's avalanche of questions and the stunned stares of the ton. "Well, I never," Lady Jersey exclaimed. The Ice Queen and the Frost Duke dancing together. The temperature in the room must have dropped 10 degrees from the combined chill. "You exaggerate, my lady," Amelia replied, though she knew the older woman was right about one thing. Her acceptance of the Duke's invitation had just changed her carefully constructed position in society. By the next morning, Amelia's dance with the Duke of Pembrooke had become the talk of London. Her mother called upon her immediately, practically vibrating with excitement. "Is it true? Did the Duke single you out? After all these years of refusing perfectly acceptable gentlemen, you chose him for your return to dancing?" Lady Grantham's questions tumbled over one another. "It was merely a quadrille, mother, not a proposal of marriage," Amelia replied, turning the page of her book with deliberate calm. "A quadrille with the Duke of Pembroke is worth more than proposals from a dozen ordinary gentlemen. Do you know his income is rumoured to exceed £40,000 a year, and Pembroke Park is said to rival Chatsworth in grandeur?" Amelia sighed. "I danced with the man. I did not inquire after his financial portfolio." But the dance had altered something fundamental in Amelia's carefully ordered existence. For 5 years, she had built walls of refusal around herself, creating a safe distance from the marriage market and its disappointments. One quadrille with the Duke had made those walls suddenly visible, and therefore vulnerable. 3 days later, an invitation arrived that further disrupted Amelia's equilibrium. The Duke was hosting a small dinner party at his London residence, and she was among the invited guests. "You must accept," her mother insisted when Amelia shared the news. "Such an invitation is practically a declaration of intent." "It is nothing of the sort," Amelia replied, though she found herself oddly reluctant to decline. "It's likely a business matter. Perhaps he wishes to discuss investments." Despite her protestations, Amelia found herself in her finest evening gown, a deep emerald silk that complemented her auburn hair, being handed down from her family's carriage at the Duke's imposing Mayfair residence 2 evenings later. The dinner party was indeed small, only 12 guests, and exquisitely arranged. Amelia found herself seated at the Duke's right hand, a position of honour that caused several of the other ladies to eye her with barely concealed envy. "Miss Grantham," the Duke said as the first course was served, "I trust you received the prospectus I sent regarding the Liverpool shipping venture." Amelia's surprise must have shown on her face, for he added, "Sir Thomas mentioned you were seeking new investment opportunities. I thought the maritime trade might interest you, given your previous success with the East India Company." "You sent a business prospectus to a young lady?" asked Lady Harrington from across the table, clearly scandalized. The Duke turned his cool gaze upon her. "I sent relevant financial information to an intelligent investor. Does that disturb you, Lady Harrington?" The older woman sputtered, and Amelia found herself suppressing a smile. "I did receive it, Your Grace," she replied. "I found the projected returns quite promising, though I wonder about the political stability of the Spanish trading routes given recent diplomatic tensions." For the remainder of the dinner, they engaged in a discussion of investment strategies that clearly baffled the other guests, but which Amelia found more stimulating than any conversation she'd had at a social event in years. As the evening concluded, the Duke escorted her personally to her carriage. "You've given the gossips fresh material tonight," Amelia observed as they walked through the marble-floored entrance hall. "First a dance, now an extended conversation about shipping investments. They won't know what to make of it." "Let them wonder," the Duke replied. "I find I care less for society's opinions with each passing year." "A luxury afforded to dukes, but rarely to unmarried ladies," she countered. He paused at the doorway, studying her face in the warm glow of the entry lamps. "Is society's approval so important to you, Miss Grantham? I had thought you above such concerns, given your history of refusing to dance despite the ton's expectations? The question caught her off guard. I refuse to dance because I have no interest in the marriage market, not because I wish to defy convention for its own sake. And why is that? Most young ladies seem to think of little else but securing a husband. I value my independence, she replied simply. Marriage, in my observation, rarely allows a woman to maintain her own identity or control her own affairs. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a new assessment. An unconventional view, but not without merit. He helped her into her carriage with a formal bow. Good evening, Miss Grantham. I look forward to hearing your decision about the Liverpool venture. As her carriage pulled away, Amelia found herself more unsettled than she cared to admit. The Duke treated her as an equal in matters of business and intellect, a courtesy rarely extended to women in her experience. It was refreshing. Over the next fortnight, a pattern emerged that set all of London society buzzing. At every event they both attended, the Duke of Pembrooke would seek out Amelia Grantham for a single dance and extended conversation. They discussed investments, books, political developments in Parliament, topics far removed from the usual ballroom chatter about the weather and mutual acquaintances. People are beginning to talk, my dear, her mother warned after Amelia had been seen in animated conversation with the Duke at Lady Sefton's musicale. If the Duke does not declare himself soon, your reputation will suffer. There is nothing to declare, Amelia insisted. We are merely acquaintances with common interests. Yet even as she said it, Amelia knew something had changed. For the first time in years, she found herself looking forward to social events rather than enduring them out of obligation. She caught herself wondering if the Duke would attend, what topics they might discuss, whether he might again request a dance. It was during Lord and Lady Castlereagh's midsummer ball that matters came to a head. Amelia had just finished another dance with the Duke, a pattern now so established that the orchestra seemed to anticipate their partnership, when Lady Harrington approached with her daughter in tow. "Your Grace," Lady Harrington simpered, "you simply must meet my Sophia. She plays the pianoforte divinely and speaks flawless French." The Duke acknowledged the introduction with cool politeness. Before he could respond further, Lady Harrington added with a significant look toward Amelia, "It is so good of you to dance with all the ladies, especially those whose prospects have diminished with time." The insult was thinly veiled, and Amelia felt her cheeks warm despite her determination to remain unaffected. The Duke's expression, however, turned dangerously cold. "Miss Grantham's company is a privilege I specifically seek, Lady Harrington, not an act of charity." His tone could have frozen the Thames in August. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe we were engaged in a private conversation." Lady Harrington retreated, her face flushed with mortification. The Duke turned to Amelia with an expression of barely contained anger. "The vultures circle the moment they sense potential competition," he observed. "I apologize for that unpleasantness." "There is no need," Amelia replied, working to keep her voice steady. "Lady Harrington merely voiced what many are thinking, that your attention to me is puzzling given my age and determined spinsterhood." The Duke studied her for a long moment. "Walk with me in the garden," he said abruptly. "The air in here has become stifling." Propriety dictated he should refuse such an invitation without a chaperone, but Amelia found herself nodding. They slipped through the French doors onto a terrace bathed in moonlight, then down stone steps into a garden fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. "You believe society finds my interest in you puzzling," the Duke said as they walked along a gravel path. "Why is that, Miss Grantham?" Amelia hesitated, then decided honesty was required. "Because you are one of the most eligible men in England, and I am a woman who has deliberately removed herself from the marriage market. And it has not occurred to you that those very qualities might be what I find most appealing." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I don't understand." The Duke's expression softened in the moonlight. "For 7 years, I have been pursued relentlessly by women interested only in my title and fortune. You are the first lady of my acquaintance who has never once angled for my attention or altered her behavior to please me." "I have little practice in pleasing others," Amelia admitted with a small smile. "Precisely. You are genuine in a society built on facades. You are intelligent in a world that encourages women to feign ignorance, and you value independence as much as I do." He took a step closer. "Do you know why I returned to London this season, Miss Grantham?" She shook her head, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the moonlit garden. "Sir Thomas mentioned you in passing during a business meeting, described you as the most level-headed investor he'd ever encountered, man or woman. When I expressed surprise, he told me about the lady who had refused to dance for 5 seasons, who managed her own investments with remarkable acumen, and who had declined no fewer than 12 proposals of marriage." 11, Amelia corrected automatically. The 12th was merely strongly implied. A genuine smile transformed the Duke's severe features. 11, then. Your reputation intrigued me enough to seek an introduction. What I discovered was even more compelling than the rumors suggested. He took her gloved hand in his, a gesture so unexpected that Amelia found herself speechless. "I have no interest in a conventional marriage," he continued. "I require neither an obedient shadow nor an ornamental hostess. What I seek is a partner, someone with whom I can build something meaningful, someone who challenges rather than flatters me." Amelia's heart was racing, but years of caution made her hesitate. "You speak as though you're proposing a business arrangement, Your Grace." "Am I?" His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand. "Perhaps in part, but there is more to it than that, as I think you know." The intensity of his gaze made her look away. "I have spent years convincing myself that marriage is merely a transaction that benefits men while constraining women. Your words sound dangerously like the arguments I've long dismissed." "Then perhaps both of us have been working under false assumptions." He released her hand and stepped back. "I will not press you further tonight, but I would ask you to consider whether independence must necessarily mean solitude, and whether partnership might offer freedoms that even your current life cannot provide." The Duke escorted her back to the ballroom in silence. As they rejoined the crowd, he bowed formally over her hand. "Think on what I've said, Miss Grantham. I'm a patient man when the prize is worth waiting for." With that, he departed, leaving Amelia in a state of confusion she had not experienced since her first season. Over the following week, Amelia found her carefully constructed worldview beginning to fracture. The Duke of Pembrooke sent no flowers, wrote no poetry, made no grand gestures of the sort that typically accompanied a courtship. Instead, he sent a detailed analysis of her investment portfolio with suggestions for diversification, along with a note that read simply, "Partnership takes many forms." Hey. She found herself unable to maintain her usual detachment. The Duke had pierced her armor not with flattery, but with recognition. He saw her clearly and valued precisely those qualities that had made her an oddity in the eyes of society. When an invitation arrived to visit the Duke's sister, Lady Elena, at her country home in Surrey, Amelia accepted with only token hesitation. The weekend house party would include several other guests, making it perfectly proper, yet she suspected it was another move in whatever game they now played. Thornfield Hall was a gracious manor house set among rolling hills and ancient woodlands. Lady Elena, a widow of independent means, proved to be as direct and intelligent as her brother, though considerably warmer in her manner. "My brother speaks very highly of you, Miss Grantham," Lady Elena said, as she showed Amelia to her chambers. "He rarely notices anyone enough to form an opinion, so you must be extraordinary indeed." "I fear his grace exaggerates my qualities," Amelia replied. Lady Elena laughed. Percy has never exaggerated anything in his life, except perhaps the seriousness with which he approaches everything. The man needs someone to remind him that life contains pleasures as well as responsibilities. The house party was small and informal compared to London's rigid social scene. The guests walked in the gardens, played cards in the evenings, and engaged in conversation that ranged far beyond the usual social niceties. Amelia found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did in society. On the second afternoon, the Duke suggested a ride to see the estate's famous Bluebell Woods. With Lady Elena and two other guests accompanying them, the excursion was entirely proper. Yet Amelia found herself alone with the Duke when their horses outpaced the others along a woodland path. "You seem more at ease here than in London," he observed as they walked their horses beneath ancient oaks. "The country has always suited me better," she admitted. "Fewer expectations, more genuine conversation. Yet you maintain a London residence and attend the season faithfully each year." Amelia smiled ruefully. "Family obligation. My mother lives for the season, and until my sister married, I was needed as a chaperone. And now it is habit, I suppose, though I admit I've found this season less tedious than most." The Duke's eyes warmed. "I'm gratified to hear it." He hesitated, then added, "My sister approves of you enormously. She says you're the first woman of my acquaintance with both a spine and a sense of humor." "High praise indeed. I find I like Lady Elena as well. Enough to consider becoming her sister by marriage." The directness of the question startled Amelia into stopping her horse. The Duke halted beside her, his expression serious, but not without vulnerability. "Your Grace." "Percy," he corrected. "If you're to refuse my proposal, at least do me the courtesy of using my given name." "I haven't refused," she said quietly, "but neither am I certain I should accept. What holds you back?" "I believe we suit each other remarkably well." Amelia struggled to articulate the fear that had kept her safely isolated for so many years. "I have built my life around independence. The thought of surrendering control, of binding myself to another's will and whims." "Is that what you think marriage to me would mean?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "Amelia, I have no wish to control you. What I propose is a true partnership, your mind and mine working together, your strengths complementing my weaknesses." "All men say such things before marriage," she replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "My father promised my mother the moon and stars, only to confine her to the nursery and drawing room once the wedding was done." Understanding dawned in the Duke's eyes. "So that's the heart of it. You fear that fine words will turn to dominance once the vows are spoken." Amelia looked away, unwilling to admit how accurately he had named her deepest fear. "What if," he said carefully, "I were to put my promises in writing? Not merely the marriage settlements, but personal pledges regarding your continued independence, your control over your inheritance, your freedom to pursue your own interests and investments." "You would do that?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "I would do considerably more to win your trust." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I have lived with the burden of others' expectations since inheriting the title. I would never impose such constraints on you." Something long frozen within Amelia began to thaw. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a marriage not as a cage, but as an alliance, a joining of forces rather than a surrender. "I need time," she said finally. "You shall have it." He released her hand as they heard the approach of the other riders. "But not too much time, I hope. Even dukes can die of suspense." The jest was so unexpected from his usually serious lips that Amelia laughed aloud, the sound echoing through the ancient woods like a promise. Upon returning to London, Amelia found herself besieged by visitors eager to hear about her weekend at Thornfield Hall. The Ton, it seemed, had decided that an engagement was imminent. Her mother was in transports of delight, already planning what would surely be the wedding of the decade. "Just think," Lady Grantham exclaimed, "my difficult, stubborn Amelia, a duchess. Who would have imagined it possible, after 5 seasons of refusing every gentleman who approached?" "Nothing is decided, mother," Amelia cautioned. "And if it were, I would hardly be the first spinster to make an advantageous match." Yet even as she spoke the words, Amelia knew this was no mere advantageous match. The Duke had awakened feelings she had long suppressed, not just desire, though that was certainly present, but a deeper longing for connection, for partnership, for a life shared rather than merely lived in parallel. A week after their return from Surrey, a messenger delivered a leather portfolio to Amelia's home. Inside, she found not flowers or love poems, but legal documents, the marriage settlements the Duke proposed, along with the personal pledges he had mentioned. The terms were astoundingly generous, guaranteeing her complete control over her inheritance, an independent allowance that would remain hers regardless of circumstances, and explicit protection for her right to continue managing her investments without interference. Attached was a personal note in the Duke's bold handwriting: "Amelia, these papers represent my solemn pledge that marriage would expand rather than diminish your freedom. What they cannot express is how ardently I wish to build a life with you, one where neither of us must compromise our essential nature to please the other. I await your answer with hope that perhaps we have both been wrong about marriage all these years. Yours, Percy." Amelia read the documents 3 times, searching for hidden traps or contingencies. There were none. The Duke had done exactly as he promised, placing her independence on equal footing with all the traditional protections of a duchess. As she sat contemplating the papers, her sister Beatrice arrived for an unexpected visit. "I heard about the Duke's proposal," Beatrice said without preamble. "Is it true?" Amelia gestured to the portfolio. "See for yourself. He has offered terms no woman in her right mind would refuse." Beatrice skimmed the documents, her eyes widening. "These are extraordinary." She looked up at her sister. "But they don't tell me what I really want to know. Do you love him, Amelia?" The question struck her like a physical blow. For all her analysis of terms and conditions, Amelia had avoided examining her own heart. "I admire him greatly," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." Amelia rose and walked to the window, watching rain begin to speckle the glass. "How does one know for certain? I've spent so many years guarding against precisely this sort of emotional entanglement." "When you're with him, does the rest of the world seem to fade?" Beatrice asked gently. "Do you find yourself thinking of him at odd moments? Does the thought of never seeing him again feel like a physical pain?" Amelia closed her eyes, remembering the Duke's rare smile, the intensity of his gaze when she made a particularly insightful observation, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. "Yes," she whispered, "to all of it, yes." Then perhaps the true risk is not in accepting his proposal, but in refusing it. Later that afternoon, Amelia sent a note to the Duke requesting a meeting in the privacy of her home, properly chaperoned by her mother, but away from society's prying eyes. He arrived promptly at the appointed hour, his expression carefully neutral though tension showed in the set of his shoulders. Lady Grantham, for once displaying tact, greeted the Duke warmly before excusing herself to the adjoining room, where she could observe but not overhear their conversation. "You've reviewed the documents?" the Duke asked without preamble. "I have." Amelia gestured for him to sit. "They are more than fair, more than generous, in fact." "But—" She smiled at his directness. "No, but I find no fault with your proposed arrangements. Yet you haven't accepted." "No," Amelia gathered her courage, "because there is something I need to know first, something no legal document can address." The Duke leaned forward. "Ask it then." "Why me?" The question had plagued her since their conversation in the garden. Of all the women in England, Why choose the one known for refusing every dance for 5 seasons? For a moment he was silent, and Amelia feared she had offended him. Then he spoke, his voice lower and more intimate than she had ever heard it. Because you refuse to dance to society's tune. Because you value substance over appearance. Because when you finally did accept my invitation to dance, I felt as though I'd been granted a rare privilege rather than my due as a duke. He met her eyes steadily. And because from that first conversation about canal shares and railway investments, I knew I would never again be satisfied with meaningless social niceties. He rose and moved to kneel before her chair, a gesture so unexpected from the formidable Duke that Amelia felt her breath catch. I offer you these legal protections not because they represent the sum of my intentions, but because they address your fears. What I cannot put into legal language is that I love you, Amelia Grantham. I love your sharp mind, your quiet determination, your refusal to compromise your principles for social approval. The declaration, spoken with such uncharacteristic vulnerability, dissolved the last of Amelia's resistance. She reached out to touch his face, a gesture more intimate than any they had shared. I have spent years believing that marriage must mean surrender, she said softly. You have shown me it can be an alliance instead. Is that a yes? Hope transformed his austere features. Yes, Amelia replied, surprised by the steadiness of her voice despite her racing heart. Yes, I will marry you, Percy. Joy illuminated his face as he captured her hand and pressed it to his lips. You have made me the happiest of men. From the doorway came a poorly stifled sob as Lady Grantham abandoned all pretense of not eavesdropping. 3 weeks later, Amelia stood before the altar of St. George's, Hanover Square, her hand resting on the Duke's arm as they exchanged vows witnessed by the cream of London society. The woman who had refused every dance for 5 seasons had waltzed straight into the most unexpected of matches, one based not on the traditional exchange of fortune for title, but on mutual respect, shared values, and yes, love. As they emerged from the church to the pealing of bells, the Duke, now her husband, leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Well, Duchess, shall we scandalize society one more time?" "How so?" she asked, smiling up at him. "By being disgracefully happy together for the next 50 years. Amelia laughed, a sound of pure joy that turned heads throughout the crowd of well-wishers. "I believe that is one scandal I shall be delighted to create." And so they did, building a partnership that defied society's expectations while creating a template for a new kind of marriage, one where independence and connection strengthened rather than diminished each other, and where love proved to be not a surrender, but the greatest freedom of all.